In this 1903 family portrait, the mother's gentle smile hides a secret. The rain hammered against the windows of the Portland estate sale as Rebecca Torres made her way through the crowded Victorian mansion. It was late October 2024, and she'd driven 3 hours from her restoration studio in Seattle to attend this particular auction. The estate belonged to the late Henry Ashford, a reclusive collector who'd amassed decades' worth of historical artifacts, photographs, and documents before his death at 97. Rebecca specialized in photographic restoration, with a particular interest in early 20th century American family portraits. Something about the formal poses and serious expressions of that era fascinated her, the way people revealed so much while trying to reveal so little. At 36, she'd spent the last 12 years building her reputation as one of the Pacific Northwest's most skilled restoration experts, breathing new life into faded memories and forgotten faces. She'd already examined several lots of photographs when she came upon a wooden crate marked Miscellaneous Photographs, Lot 47. Inside were approximately 60 images, most in various states of deterioration. She carefully lifted each one, making mental notes about restoration challenges and historical value, her trained eye catching details others might miss. Then she found it, a photograph that made her breath catch. The image was larger than the others, approximately 8 by 10 inches, mounted on thick cardboard backing. It showed a family of 5 posed in what appeared to be a well-appointed parlor. The father stood behind a velvet chair, one hand on his wife's shoulder, his expression stern and dignified, embodying the patriarchal authority typical of the era. The mother sat in the chair, her posture perfect, her hands folded demurely in her lap. 3 children surrounded them, 2 boys standing beside their father, perhaps ages 8 and 10, stiff in their formal poses, and a young girl, maybe 5 years old, sitting on a small stool beside her mother, her small hands clasped together. What caught Rebecca's attention wasn't the formal composition or the elaborate Victorian furnishings visible in the background. The ornate wallpaper, the heavy drapes, the expensive furniture that spoke of wealth and status. It was the mother's face. While everyone else in the photograph stared at the camera with the typical solemnity of the era, their expressions serious and carefully controlled, the mother wore a gentle smile. Not a broad grin, that would have been inappropriate for a formal portrait, but a soft, knowing expression that seemed almost modern in its warmth and authenticity. Rebecca turned the photograph over. Written in faded pencil, "The Harrison Family, San Francisco, March 1903. Back in her Seattle studio that evening, Rebecca began the careful process of digitizing the Harrison family portrait. Rain continued to tap against the windows as she worked, the city lights of downtown Seattle glowing in the distance. She placed the photograph on her high-resolution scanner, a professional-grade device capable of capturing details invisible to the naked eye, and initiated the scanning process. As the machine hummed softly, capturing every nuance of the century-old image, Rebecca prepared her workstation. She'd restored hundreds of photographs over the years, but something about this one felt different. That smile haunted her. It suggested secrets, hidden stories, lives more complex than the formal pose revealed. The scan completed with a soft beep. Rebecca pulled up the digital file on her large monitor and began her standard examination process, zooming in section by section. The photograph was in remarkable condition for its age, only minor foxing around the edges, a small crease in the upper right corner, and some slight fading that could be easily corrected. The family appeared prosperous, even by Nob Hill standards. The father wore an expensive 3-piece suit, custom-tailored with a gold watch chain visible across his vest. The mother's dress was silk, deep burgundy in the original coloring, with intricate beadwork on the bodice that must have taken weeks to complete. The children were dressed in their finest, the boys in matching sailor suits, popular for young boys of that era, and the girl in a white lace dress with satin ribbons carefully arranged in her dark hair. Rebecca zoomed in on individual faces, studying expressions and posture. The father's face was hard, his jaw set, his eyes staring directly at the camera with an intensity that suggested he was a man used to being obeyed. The boys looked uncomfortable, their young faces trying to mimic their father's seriousness. The little girl appeared nervous, her eyes slightly wide, one small hand gripping the edge of her stool. But the mother, Catherine, according to the notation, looked directly at the camera with that enigmatic smile, her eyes clear and confident. Rebecca enhanced the image further, bringing the woman's features into sharper focus. She was beautiful, probably in her early 30s, with delicate features and an elegant neck. But it was her expression that captivated Rebecca. There was something knowing in that smile, something that suggested she possessed knowledge or power that the others in the photograph didn't share. Rebecca saved the enhanced image and opened a new browser window. It was time to discover who Catherine Harrison really was, and what secret lay behind that mysterious smile. She typed Harrison Family San Francisco 1903 into the genealogy database and began her search. The 1900 census was Rebecca's first stop. She scrolled through pages of handwritten entries, looking for Harrison families in San Francisco with the right configuration of children. The work was tedious. Harrison was a common surname, and San Francisco had been a booming city at the turn of the century, filled with families seeking fortune in the aftermath of the gold rush era. After nearly 2 hours, she found them. James Harrison, age 38, occupation listed as manufacturer. Wife Catherine, age 32, occupation listed simply as wife. Sons William, age 10, and Charles, age 8. Daughter Alice, age 5. Their address was 1247 California Street, right in the heart of Nob Hill, where San Francisco's wealthiest families built their mansions. Rebecca searched for James Harrison in business directories and found multiple entries. He owned Harrison Textile Manufacturing, a large factory in the industrial district south of Market Street. The business employed over 200 workers and supplied fabric to clothing manufacturers throughout California and the Western Territories. Newspaper articles from the San Francisco Chronicle mentioned him occasionally, attending Chamber of Commerce meetings, contributing to civic improvement projects, hosting business dinners at his California Street residence. The family appeared successful and respectable, exactly what their formal portrait suggested. But as Rebecca dug deeper, searching for information specifically about Catherine, she found an odd pattern emerging. While James appeared regularly in public records and newspaper accounts, Catherine was nearly invisible. She appeared in society pages a few times between 1900 and 1903, listed among attendees at charity balls and cultural events, always as Mrs. James Harrison, never with any individual recognition or description. No interviews, no biographical sketches, no mention of charitable work or social activities beyond basic attendance at functions where her presence as James Harrison's wife would be expected. That absence was unusual. Rebecca had researched enough wealthy families from this era to know that society women, especially those with means and education, often carved out public identities for themselves. They led charitable organizations, patronized the arts, organized social reform movements, wrote for newspapers and magazines. The society pages of 1903 San Francisco were full of such women, Mrs. Phoebe Hearst funding educational initiatives, Mrs. Eleanor Martin leading cultural societies, dozens of other wealthy women making their mark on the city. But Catherine Harrison had left almost no trace. She existed in the public record only as an appendage to her husband, a shadow figure whose sole identity was wife and mother. For a woman whose photograph showed such confidence and self-possession, such remarkable absence from public life seemed contradictory. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, staring at the enhanced portrait on her screen. What had Catherine's life really been like? Had she been content with invisibility? Or had something, or someone, kept her hidden? Rebecca continued tracking the Harrison family through city directories year by year. The pattern remained consistent through 1905. James Harrison, manufacturer, residing at 1247 California Street with his family. Then came 1906 and everything changed. The entry for that year listed only James Harrison, manufacturer, at a different address, the Palace Hotel on New Market Street. No mention of Catherine or the children. Rebecca's heart sank. She knew what had happened in April 1906, the great San Francisco earthquake, followed by 3 days of fires that had devastated the city, killing thousands and destroying most of the buildings south of Van Ness Avenue. She searched death records from 1906, dreading what she might find. The records were incomplete. So many people had died that documenting them all had been nearly impossible. but she found 3 entries that made her eyes fill with tears. William Harrison, age 16, killed April 18, 1906, buried at Laurel Hill Cemetery. Charles Harrison, age 14, killed April 18, 1906, buried beside his brother. Alice Harrison, age 8, killed April 18, 1906, buried with her brothers. All 3 children dead on the same day, in the same disaster. Rebecca could hardly imagine the horror, the building collapsing perhaps, or the fires that had swept through the city in the earthquake's aftermath. James Harrison had survived but had lost everything. Except, Rebecca searched carefully through the death records again. There was no entry for Catherine Harrison. She checked variations of the name, searched by age and year, looked for unidentified female bodies from the earthquake period. Nothing. Had Catherine died but somehow gone unrecorded in the chaos? Or had she not been with her family when the earthquake struck? Rebecca returned to the city directories, tracking James Harrison's movements after 1906. He'd lived at the Palace Hotel for several months, then moved to a smaller residence on Pine Street in 1907. In 1908, he'd relocated again, this time to a house in the Sunset District, far from his former Nob Hill mansion. The business directories showed that Harrison Textile Manufacturing had survived the earthquake. The factory, located in an area that had escaped the worst of the fires, had continued operating. James had rebuilt his business, but apparently never rebuilt his family life. He lived alone, attended business functions alone, and according to a 1910 newspaper article about prominent San Francisco businessmen, had never recovered from the loss of his children in the Great Disaster. But still no mention of Catherine, not in death records, not in newspaper accounts of the earthquake's victims, nowhere. It was as if she had simply vanished from history before the earthquake had even occurred. Rebecca pulled up the enhanced photograph again, studying Catherine's face with new intensity. That smile seemed even more mysterious now. What had happened to this woman? Determined to find answers, Rebecca expanded her search beyond census records and city directories. She began combing through newspaper archives more systematically, looking for any mention of Catherine Harrison between 1903 and 1906. She started with society pages, then moved to other sections, local news, charity announcements, even classified advertisements. Finally, in the March 1904 edition of the San Francisco Chronicle, she found something, a small article about Pacific Hospital's expansion of its charity ward. The piece listed the names of volunteers who had contributed time to caring for indigent patients, among them Mrs. Catherine Harrison of California Street, who has generously devoted herself to nursing duties in our most challenging wards. Nursing duties. Rebecca sat up straighter. Wealthy women did engage in charitable work, but actually serving as nurses, providing hands-on care to sick patients, was unusual for someone of Catherine's social standing. Most society women contributed money, organized fundraising events, or served on charitable boards. They didn't typically perform the physical labor of nursing. Rebecca searched for more information about Pacific Hospital and found several references to its challenging wards, a euphemism she soon discovered for the isolation ward where patients with contagious diseases, particularly tuberculosis, were housed. Tuberculosis was epidemic in early 1900 San Francisco, and the isolation ward at Pacific Hospital was where the city's poorest and sickest tubercular patients were sent, often to die. Working in such a ward was dangerous. Despite growing medical knowledge about disease transmission, there was still no cure for tuberculosis in 1904, and caregivers frequently contracted the illness from their patients. The mortality rate among isolation ward patients was over 90%. Most of the nurses who worked there were either desperately poor women with no other employment options, or nuns driven by religious conviction to care for the dying. For a wealthy society woman to volunteer for such work was almost unprecedented. Rebecca found an article from May 1904 that mentioned Catherine specifically. Mrs. Harrison has shown remarkable dedication to the care of our most afflicted patients, spending upwards of 20 hours per week in the isolation ward, where her gentle manner and tireless efforts have brought comfort to many in their final days. 20 hours per week. That wasn't casual charity work. That was a serious commitment, almost a second occupation. Rebecca imagined Catherine leaving her mansion on California Street, traveling to the hospital, donning a nursing apron, and entering the isolation ward where the air was thick with disease and death. What had motivated her? What had driven a woman of wealth and privilege to expose herself to such danger? Rebecca continued searching and found more articles mentioning Catherine's hospital work throughout 1904 and into early 1905. Then, abruptly, the mentions stopped. Rebecca contacted the San Francisco Historical Society, hoping their archives might contain more information about the Harrison family. A helpful archivist named David Chen responded to her email within hours, intrigued by her research. He agreed to search the Society's collection for any Harrison-related documents. 3 days later, Chen sent an email with several scanned documents attached. Found something interesting in a collection of papers donated by Thomas Harrison in the 1950s. James Harrison's brother. Looks like there was significant family drama. See attached letters. Rebecca's hands trembled slightly as she opened the first attachment. It was a letter dated August 20th, 1905, written in a strong, masculine hand. Dear Thomas, I write with a heavy heart to inform you that Catherine has left our home. The situation has become impossible. She refuses to cease her activities at the hospital despite my repeated demands. She spends more time with dying strangers than with her own children. The scandal has become unbearable. People whisper about her constant presence in the disease wards, question her priorities as a mother, and I have become a subject of ridicule among my business associates. I have given her an ultimatum. Abandon this dangerous obsession or leave this house. She chose to leave. The children are devastated. William and Charles ask for her constantly, and little Alice cries herself to sleep each night. I do not know how to explain to them that their mother values the lives of consumptive paupers more than her own family. I have told our social circle that Catherine is visiting relatives in the East. I trust you will maintain this fiction. Your brother, James. Rebecca read the letter 3 times, her understanding of the photograph's story shifting with each reading. This wasn't a tale of a woman abandoning her children on a whim. This was about a fundamental conflict between a husband's demands and a woman's calling. Catherine had chosen her nursing work over her marriage, fully aware of the consequences. The second letter, dated October 1905, revealed more. Thomas, I have learned that Catherine is living in Oakland, continuing her nursing work at a charity hospital there. She has made no attempt to contact the children. My attorney advises that I can obtain a legal separation on grounds of abandonment, though the scandal would be considerable. For now, I maintain the fiction that she is away caring for an ill relative. The children still ask for her daily. I do not understand how any mother could make such a choice. James. Oakland. Catherine had been living just across the bay from her children, close enough to see them but choosing instead to continue her work with the dying. Rebecca stared at the enhanced photograph, at Catherine's mysterious smile, and suddenly understood what she was seeing. That wasn't just a smile, it was determination. Catherine had known, even in 1903, what she wanted her life to be. Rebecca needed to understand what had driven Catherine to make such a devastating choice. She began researching women's roles in early 1900s America, particularly regarding nursing and medicine. What she discovered provided crucial context for Catherine's decision. In 1903, women's lives were severely circumscribed by social expectations and legal restrictions. Married women had few rights. They couldn't vote, couldn't own property in their own names in most states, couldn't sign contracts without their husband's permission. A woman's identity was subsumed into her husband's, her primary duty defined as obedience to him and devotion to her children. Yet this was also a time of growing women's activism. The suffrage movement was gaining momentum. Women were entering professions previously closed to them, and social reform movements led by women were beginning to challenge traditional gender roles. Florence Nightingale had transformed nursing from menial labor into a respected profession, and women's hospitals and medical schools were opening across the country. But women who chose professional or charitable work over domestic duties faced harsh social judgment. Newspapers and magazines regularly published articles condemning unwomanly behavior, arguing that women who neglected their families for outside interests were violating natural law and threatening social order. Rebecca found an editorial from the San Francisco Examiner, dated June 1905, that could have been written about Catherine specifically. We have observed with growing concern the tendency of certain society women to abandon their proper sphere, the home and family, in pursuit of misguided charitable endeavors. While charity is admirable, a woman's first duty must always be to her husband and children. Those who nurse strangers while their own children lack maternal care are guilty of the grossest form of selfishness, disguising personal ambition as compassion. The article continued with particular venom toward women working in isolation wards. To expose oneself to deadly contagion while one's own children wait at home is not charity. It is recklessness bordering on madness. Such women risk bringing disease into their own households, endangering the very children they claim to love. Rebecca imagined Catherine reading such articles, facing daily criticism from her husband, her social circle, perhaps even from her own family. The pressure to conform, to abandon her nursing work and return to being simply Mrs. James Harrison, must have been immense. Yet she'd resisted. She'd chosen her calling over her comfort, her sense of purpose over social acceptance. But at what cost? Rebecca thought of the 3 children, buried side by side after the earthquake, their mother not present to mourn them because she'd been driven away a year earlier. Had Catherine known about their deaths? Had she attended their funerals? Or had she been so completely cut off from her former life that she'd learned about it only through newspaper accounts? Rebecca decided to track Catherine's life after she left San Francisco. If she'd been living in Oakland and working at a charity hospital there should be records. She contacted the Oakland Public Library's History Department and requested information about charity hospitals operating in Oakland in 1905 and 1906. The response came from a librarian named Patricia who specialized in Oakland's medical history. There were 3 charity hospitals in Oakland during that period, Patricia wrote. The most likely candidate for your research is the Oakland Free Dispensary and Hospital, which operated an isolation ward for tuberculosis patients. I found a reference to a nurse named Catherine Hayes, who worked there from late 1905 through early 1907. Could this be your Catherine Harrison using a different surname? Catherine Hayes. Close enough to Harrison that it might be deliberate, keeping her initials, changing just enough to avoid immediate recognition. Rebecca asked Patricia to send any available information about Catherine Hayes. The documents that arrived showed a woman completely devoted to nursing. Catherine Hayes had worked full-time at the Oakland Free Dispensary, specializing in the care of terminal tuberculosis patients. The hospital's annual report from 1906 specifically praised her. Miss Hayes has shown extraordinary dedication to our most desperate cases, often remaining at patients' bedsides through the night, providing comfort when medicine can offer no cure. Her compassion and skill have eased the suffering of dozens of dying patients who otherwise would have faced their final hours alone and afraid. Miss Hayes. She'd presented herself as unmarried, erasing her identity as a wife and mother completely. Rebecca found records showing that Catherine had lived in a modest boarding house on Telegraph Avenue, sharing a room with another nurse. Her salary had been minimal. Charity hospitals paid poorly, but apparently she'd needed no wealth. She'd traded her mansion, her social position, and her family for the opportunity to do the work she believed mattered most. Then came the earthquake. According to the hospital's records, Catherine had been working a night shift on April 18, 1906, when the earthquake struck. The Oakland Free Dispensary building had sustained damage but hadn't collapsed. Catherine had spent the days following the earthquake helping to care for injured refugees who flooded across the bay from devastated San Francisco. She would have seen the newspaper reports. She would have read about the thousands dead, the city in ruins. She must have known that her former home on California Street, high on Nob Hill, had likely been destroyed. Had she tried to find out if James and the children had survived? Had she learned about their deaths? The records provided no answers. Catherine Hayes continued working at the Oakland Free Dispensary through 1906 and into 1907. Her presence noted in hospital documents, but her personal feelings remained private. Rebecca traced Catherine's life forward from 1907, piecing together fragments from various records. In 1908, Catherine Hayes left the Oakland Free Dispensary and moved to Los Angeles. where she worked at the Los Angeles County Hospital. Records showed she continued specializing in tuberculosis care, working in the isolation ward despite the dangers. By 1910, Catherine appeared in the census as a hospital nurse living in a boarding house near the hospital. She was listed as unmarried, age 42, birthplace Massachusetts. She'd erased her past completely. No mention of her former married name, her former life, her lost children. Rebecca found a photograph from 1912 in a Los Angeles newspaper article about the county hospital's nursing staff. Catherine stood in the back row of a group photo, wearing a nurse's uniform, her hair now streaked with gray. She was 54 years old in the photograph, and her face showed the toll of years spent caring for the dying. But even in this grainy newspaper image, Rebecca could see something of the same determination she'd noticed in the 1903 family portrait, a woman who knew who she was and what her life meant. Catherine continued nursing until 1918, when tuberculosis, the disease she'd spent years fighting, finally claimed her. The death certificate filed by the hospital where she'd worked listed her as Catherine Hayes, spinster, age 60, occupation nurse. Cause of death, pulmonary tuberculosis. She was buried in an unmarked grave in the Los Angeles County Cemetery, her funeral attended only by a few fellow nurses. No family claimed her body. No obituary mentioned her former life as Catherine Harrison, wife and mother. She died as she had lived for the previous 13 years, alone, devoted to her work, cut off from the family she'd left behind. Rebecca sat in her studio, surrounded by documents chronicling two lives, Catherine Harrison and Catherine Hayes, the same woman divided by choice and circumstance. The gulf between the elegant society woman in the 1903 photograph and the exhausted nurse who died alone in a charity hospital seemed unbridgeable. Yet Rebecca didn't see tragedy in Catherine's story. She saw something more complex. Catherine had made an impossible choice, sacrificing her children's daily presence for work she believed saved lives. She'd paid an enormous price, losing everything, her family, her social position, her comfort and security. But she'd also gained something, the ability to live according to her own convictions, to dedicate her life to a purpose she considered meaningful. That smile in the 1903 photograph, Rebecca understood it now. Catherine had already known even then that she wasn't meant for the life society expected of her. That smile was defiance, determination, and perhaps a touch of foreknowledge. She'd known she would eventually have to choose, and she'd already decided what that choice would be. Rebecca spent weeks crafting a comprehensive article documenting Catherine Harrison's story. She included the enhanced 1903 family portrait, the letters from James to Thomas, hospital records from both San Francisco and Oakland, and the 1912 photograph of Catherine in her nurse's uniform. The piece traced Catherine's journey from wealthy society wife to charity nurse, exploring the impossible choices women faced in early 20th century America. She submitted the article to the Journal of Pacific Historical Review, and it was accepted for publication. But Rebecca felt that wasn't enough. Catherine's story deserved a wider audience, a more permanent memorial. She contacted the San Francisco Museum and Historical Society and proposed an exhibition on women's nursing work in early 1900s California, centered on Catherine's story. The curator, intrigued by the narrative's complexity, agreed. The exhibition would open in 6 months, featuring not just Catherine's photographs and documents, but also materials about other women who dedicated themselves to caring for tubercular patients during the epidemic years. Rebecca also reached out to Patricia in Oakland and David Chen in San Francisco, and together they tracked down descendants of the Harrison family, distant cousins descended from James's brother Thomas. These relatives had known nothing about Catherine's nursing work or her years as Catherine Hayes. They'd been told only that she'd died young before the earthquake. One descendant, a woman named Jennifer who lived in Sacramento, drove to Seattle to meet Rebecca and see the documents in person. She was James Harrison's great-great-niece, and she wept as she read Catherine's story. "We always knew there was something missing from the family history," Jennifer said. "My grandmother used to say that there were secrets about the San Francisco years, things that weren't talked about. But this, I never imagined anything like this." Jennifer provided Rebecca with additional family photographs, including one that made Rebecca's heart stop. A picture of Catherine with her 3 children, taken around 1904. The children clustered around their mother, and Catherine's arms encircled them, her face radiating love. It was clear she'd adored them, even as she'd chosen to leave them. For the exhibition, Rebecca created a dual display, the formal 1903 family portrait on one side, showing Catherine in her role as wife and mother, and the 1912 nurse photograph on the other, showing her in the uniform that represented her chosen identity. Between them, she placed Catherine's own words, drawn from a letter she'd written to the director of the Oakland Free Dispensary in 1906, found in the hospital's archives. "I know the world judges me harshly for leaving my children. I judge myself harshly. There is not a day I do not think of them, not an hour I do not feel the weight of my choice. But I also know that the work I do here matters. These patients, poor, friendless, dying, have no one else. My children have their father, his wealth, every comfort. These people have only what I can give them. I cannot be two people. I cannot be the mother society demands and the nurse these patients need. I chose. I live with that choice. And when my time comes, I will answer for it." The exhibition opened in April 2025, and Rebecca stood in the gallery watching visitors study Catherine's photographs, read her letters, contemplate her impossible choice. Some visitors condemned her decision to leave her children. Others praised her dedication to nursing. Most simply struggled with the complexity, recognizing that Catherine's story defied easy judgment. Rebecca had placed the enhanced 1903 family portrait at the exhibition's entrance, with a placard explaining what she'd discovered. Look closely at the mother's gentle smile. In 1903, Catherine Harrison already knew she could not be the woman her husband and society expected. That smile holds a secret, not of shame, but of determination. Within 2 years, she would sacrifice everything to follow her calling. Her 3 children would die in the 1906 earthquake, never understanding why their mother had left. Catherine herself would die 12 years later, alone and forgotten, having spent her final years caring for the sick and dying. This photograph captures the last moment when her 2 lives, mother and nurse, coexisted. After this, she would have to choose. Visitors stood before the portrait for long minutes, studying that enigmatic smile, searching for answers to questions that perhaps had no single answer. Was Catherine Harrison a hero who dedicated her life to the most vulnerable? Or was she a mother who failed her own children? The truth, Rebecca had concluded, was that she was both. And perhaps that's what made her story so powerful and so heartbreaking. On the final day of the exhibition, Rebecca stood alone in the gallery after hours, looking at Catherine's face. She thought about all the hidden stories waiting in old photographs, all the complex lives reduced to formal poses and simple labels. Catherine's smile had led her to a story of sacrifice, loss, conviction, and impossible choices. A story that challenged easy assumptions about duty, love, and the meaning of a life well lived. "Thank you," Rebecca whispered to the photograph. "Thank you for making me see you."